UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
නව ඩොමෙක්ස් වැල්ලම් සහ විසබීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. ඩොමෙක්ස්.
Tonight, the greater good. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in his Independence Day address says that his aim is not to please everybody, but to look out for the nation. Wrong number. The International Monetary Fund clarifies no request for financial help from Sri Lanka. Enjoy it while it lasts. The Health Ministry warns of hospital bed occupancy rise by 10%.
All but we are experiencing now, all this freedom, all this leverage, all this crossing borders, moving around, being free all around, will not last long because everything has a limit over it.
Laying the groundwork. The Tamil National Alliance lists out Sri Lanka's alleged failures to the UN Human Rights Council. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 4th of February 2022.
Vegetable විසඳන no fried rice. අලුත් recipe දැනගන්න missed call එකක් දෙන්න.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Thammike Kanai. Now, the 74th Independence Day celebrations were held under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Independence Square this morning, featuring 6,500 armed forces personnel on parade to present the ceremonial salute to the head of state. Addressing the nation today, the president warned the public against falling prey to skewed interpretations of the country's challenges being propagated by groups with vested interests. He also stated that the government's policy is to focus on doing what's right by the country and not merely pleasing everybody.
The 74th National Independence Day parade was held at Independence Square in Colombo, beginning at 7:30 a.m. this morning. This year, the theme of the national celebration was An Affluent Tomorrow and Prosperous Motherland with Challenges Overcome. First up was the arrival of the distinguished invitees that included members of the diplomatic community. As per protocol, after the arrival of the commanders of the Tri-Forces, the Secretary of Defence, the Chief Justice and the Prime Minister, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa arrived to formally commence the national event with the raising of the national flag and the singing of the national anthem. After this, 2-minute silence was observed to honor the country's fallen war heroes. This was then followed by the presentation of the Guard of Honor by the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and then the ceremonial 21-gun salute conducted by the Artillery Regiment of the Sri Lanka Army. Following this, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa commenced his national address, where he called for a national effort to promote a more positive outlook. The President also reaffirmed the government's commitment to upholding of the rule of law and abiding by international conventions.
අද වන විට ශ්‍රී ලංකාව නිදහස් ස්වෛරී ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී රටක්. ජාති ආගම් ભેදයකින් තොරව සෑම ශ්‍රී ලාංකිකයටම අද රටේ ඕනෑම ප්‍රදේශයක නිදහස්ව සුරක්ෂිතව ජීවත් වීමේ අයිතිය තිබෙනවා. රට තුල සම්පූර්ණ මාධ්‍ය නිදහස තිබෙනවා. නිදහස් ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී රටක වැසියන් ලෙස අපි සියලු දෙනාටම අයිතිවාසිකම් තිබෙනවා මෙන්ම වගකීම්ද තිබෙනවා. වගකීම් ගැන අමතක කොට අයිතිවාසිකම් ගැන පමණක් කතා කිරීම සුදුසු වන්නේ නැහැ. අපේ අරමුණ රට වෙනුවෙන් නිවැරදි දේ කිරීම මිස සියලු දෙනාම සතුටු කිරීම නොවේ. අනාගතය දෙස සුබවාදීව බලන ධනාත්මක චින්තනයකින් පමණයි අපට අපේ ඉදිරි ගමන සාර්ථක කරගන්නට හැකිවන්නේ. අසුබවාදීන් ලෝකය වෙනස් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ප්‍රශ්නයකට විසඳුමක් ඉදිරිපත් නොකොට විවේචනය කරන්නට පමණක් පුරුදු වී ඇති අයට අනාගතය ගැන දැක්මක් නැහැ. යම් කාරණාවලදී දේශීය මෙන්ම විදේශීය බලවේගත් අපට එරෙහිව සංවිධානය වෙනවා. සමහර විට ඔබ අවට සිදුවන සෑම දෙයක්ම ඔබට එරෙහිව සිදුවන කුමන්ත්‍රණයක් මෙන් පෙනෙන අවස්ථා තිබෙනවා. ජනතාව නායකයෙකුන් බලාපොරොත්තු වන්නේ මේ සියලු අර්බුද කළමනාකරණය කරගෙන රට ඉදිරියට මෙහෙයවීම මිස ප්‍රශ්නවලින් පලායාම නොවේ. දුෂ්කර කාල හැමදාමත් ඒ ලෙසම පවතින්නේ නැහැ. දුෂ්කර කාලවලට මුහුණ දීමට ශක්තිමත් මිනිසුන් අවශ්‍යයි. ඒ නිසා අන් අයව මානසිකව වට්ටන කිසිවෙක් මේ අවස්ථාවේ සමාජයට කරන්නේ උපකාරයක් නොවේ. ඒ නිසා අපි සියලු දෙනාම විශාල වගකීමක් තිබෙනවා. මේ අර්බුදයට සාර්ථකව මුහුණ දීම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය ධනාත්මක චින්තනය රට තුල ගොඩනගන්නට. අපේ රටේ සංවර්ධන ක්‍රියාවලියේදී ආයෝජන අත්‍යවශ්‍යම සාධකයක්. දේශපාලන අරමුණු මුල් කරගෙන දේශීය හෝ විදේශීය ආයෝජන වලට එරෙහිව වැරදි මත ජනගත කරන්නට උත්සාහ කරන පිරිස් ගැන ජනතාව වඩාත් පරීක්ෂාකාරී විය යුතුයි. දේශීයත්වය අගයන රටේ ස්වෛරීත්වය සුරකින ජාතික නායකත්වයකට එරෙහි බලවේග ඉතා සූක්ෂම ලෙස විවිධ බොරු ප්‍රචාර හරහා ජනතාව නොමග යමන්නට කටයුතු කරනවා. මා ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා මේ රටේ ජනතාවගෙන් සෑම විටම විචාර බුද්ධියෙන් කටයුතු කරන්නට කියා. දත්ත මද පදනම්ම කරුණු විමසා බලා සත්‍යය හඳුනාගෙන තීන්දුව තීරණ ගන්නවා නම් කිසිවෙකුට ජනතාව නොමග යමන්නට බැහැ. අපි නීතියේ ආධිපත්‍ය සුරකින ජාත්‍යන්තර සම්මුතියට ගරු කරන රටක්. පටු අරමුණු මුල් කරගෙන ලංකාවට විවිධ චෝදනා එල්ල කරන්නට යම් පාර්ශවයක් උත්සාහ කළත් කිසිදු ආකාරයක මානව හිමිකම් කඩකිරීමකට රජය අනුබල දී නැති අතර ඉදිරියේදීත් එවැනි සිදුවීම් වලට ඉඩ තබන්නේ නැහැ. මොනම හේතුවක් නිසාවත් මේ රට තුල යලි අන්තවාදයට හිසවන්නට අප ඉඩ දෙන්නේ නැහැ. මගේ ඉදිරි දූර කාලය තුල රටේ තිරසාර සංවර්ධනයක් උදා කර ගැනීමට අවශ්‍ය සියලු සැලසුම් මේ විනවිට ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙමින් තිබෙනවා. මොනතරම් බාධක ආවත් අපේ රටේ බහුතර ජනතාව අනාගතය දෙස සුබවාදීව බලා ඔවුන්ගේ නිසි දායකත්වය ලබා දුන්නොත් අපට ඒ අරමුණු ඉටු කරගන්නට පුළුවන්.
Following this, the traditional march past and salute by tribe forces and police personnel was held, followed by the customary cultural parade as well. A total of 6,500 troops and 11 armoured vehicles were deployed for salute this time.
The national flag being carried by 100
நான்காவது துரித தாக்குதல் படையணியினர் இப்பொழுது வெள்ளப்பாலை அனுதிம லூட்டினர் கமாண்டர் அனுர குணதிலක ශ්‍රී ලාංකීය ගුවන් තලයේ සුරකිමින් දේශයේ ස්වෛරී භාවය ආරක්ෂා කිරීම උදෙසා අපි මානවත් අන්දමින් මෙලෙස එක්වේ. ජාතික දජය රැගත් බෙල් 212 සහ ඊට පිටුපසින් බෙල් 412 වර්ගයේ ප්‍රථමයෙන් පැමිණෙන්නේ ස්කොට්ලන්ඩ් ලීඩ් ආසියල විතාන වයි 12 ගුවන් යානා පෙළක් දැන් ඉහළ අහසේ දිස් වෙනවා. අනතුරුව එතයි ජය ආදර්ශ පාඨය කරගත් ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොලිස් විශේෂ මොහොත විශේෂ කාර්ය බලකායේ අනුදැන උදාහරණ ලෙසින් නියෝජ්‍ය පොලිස්පති නීතිඥ වර්ගයට සංවිධානාත්මක අපරාධ මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය වැටලීම් සිදු කරමින් මතින් නිදහස් රටක් අධිකරණයේ රත්නායක ගමන් කරනු ලබනවා.
ගෞරවාන්විත යශෝදරියන්ගේ සම්ප්‍රාප්තියයි මේ समस्त सन्न रणक्षेत्रीන් ලෙස අභිමන්සල මිහිඳු සෙත්ම.
Meanwhile, the parade also included a display of Sri Lanka's locally manufactured military equipment.
එක්වන්නේ ප්‍රධාන මේඩෙක් මුන්බාහ இப்போது 120
සන්නද රද මිලදී ගැනීම සඳහා බැහැවෙන විදේශීය පිරිවැය අවම කරමින් විදුලි හා යාන්ත්‍රික ඉංජිනේරු බලකාය වෙතින් මේ වසරේදී නිර්මාණය කර නිෂ්පාදනය කරන ලද විබ්බෝම්බ සහ රැකසිට ප්‍රහාර දීම් වලින් බට ලංකා නාවික හමුදාව නෞකා තැනීමේ කර්මාන්තයට එක්වෙමින් 2008 වර්ෂයේ සිට නිෂ්පාදනය කරනු ලබන වේව් රයිඩර් වර්ගයේ වෙරළාරක්ෂක මුර යාත්‍රාව සහිත
ලංකාවේ ස්ථාපිත ප්‍රථම රසායනික ජීව විද්‍යාත්මක න්‍යෂ්ටික විකිරණශීලී හා පුපුරණ ද්‍රව්‍ය සඳහා ප්‍රතිචාර දැක්වීමේ පක්ෂාංග.
Afterwards, the Sri Lanka Air Force carried out its flypast using 26 aircraft.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් හමුදා ගුවන් යානා පෙළපාලියේ අපේ මානවත් අයුරින් ගමන් කරන ආකාරය
This was then followed by the traditional 25-gun naval salute aboard SLNS Gajabahu in the seas of Goldfish Green.
Now, moving on with other stories, the International Monetary Fund says that there had been no request from the government of Sri Lanka for financial support. The finance minister said on Wednesday that the government asked the IMF in writing to give their support and expertise on the country's current situation. However, an IMF official is quoted saying that it is ready to discuss options with the island if the government asks for financial support.
The International Monetary Fund says that it is ready to discuss options with Sri Lanka if the government asks for financial support. Quoting the IMF mission chief for Sri Lanka, Masahiro Nozaki, the AFP says that while the IMF has not received a request for financial support from Sri Lanka, the staff stands ready to discuss options if requested. On Wednesday, Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa said that the government has called for expertise from the IMF over the country's financial situation. He also noted whether to accept the advice of the IMF is not a decision solely for him to make. Yesterday, Governor of the Central Bank said that the Finance Minister's comment about informing the IMF to provide expertise on the country's economic situation is about a routine technical assistance program on the macro-fiscal capacity building for Finance Ministry's new macro-fiscal unit and nothing else. The IMF country chief looks to have echoed the Central Bank Governor's explanation, saying the Finance Minister's remarks referred to an ongoing technical assistance mission by the IMF. He added that the mission aims to strengthen the macro-fiscal unit at the Ministry of Finance and focuses on training staff at the unit as part of the IMF's capacity development activities, and that the mission is being conducted virtually until the 9th of February. Nozaki had gone on to say that the IMF continues to closely monitor economic and policy developments in Sri Lanka and that a board meeting will be held at the end of February to review the latest economic data from the country.
With another session of the United Nations Human Rights Council set to start towards the end of this month, the Tamil National Alliance has already started to lay the groundwork to get member nations to exert pressure on the island. Leader of the Tamil National Alliance has written to member states noting the government's failings, urging them to clearly articulate that Sri Lanka has failed in its obligations.
Leader of the Tamil National Alliance, MPR Sampanthan, has written to the members of the United Nations Human Rights Council ahead of the 49th session of the UNHRC, set to get underway on the 28th of this month. In the letter dated 31st of January, Sampanthan accuses Sri Lanka of not taking meaningful steps to address the commitment made during a UN Secretary General's visit to the island following the end of the war on the 23rd of May in 2009. While accusing the Sri Lankan government of oppressing the Tamil people through militarization, indefinite detentions, arrests of civil society and media personnel, the most serious so-called danger to the Tamil people is highlighted as land grab. Sampanthan says that land grabbing is happening under the pretext of archaeological explorations, wildlife and forest reserves protection. The government, he says, is engaged in a program of redemarcation of divisional boundaries and colonization of historical Tamil-speaking areas with new singular settlers so as to render any future settlement of the Tamil question nugatory. According to the TNA leader, this situation has led to Tamil people leaving the country. His letter to the UNHRC member states called on the Council to clearly articulate that Sri Lanka has failed in its obligations to investigate allegations of violence and not taken any steps to address the Tamil national question. He also calls on member states to adopt measures to ensure that Tamil people are able to live in what he calls our areas of historical habitation, the north and eastern provinces within a united and undivided Sri Lanka.
In the meantime, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has labelled a testimony recorded by former Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission Chief Ambika Satkunanathan as rife with misrepresentations and of ignoring progress. Further, the ministry also points out that calls for the removal of Sri Lanka's GSP Plus facility are short-sighted in that it be disastrous for the fishing and farming communities, mostly of the northern and eastern provinces.
The Foreign Ministry has issued an official communique in response to a statement recorded by former Human Rights Commission Chairperson Ambika Satkunanathan to the European Parliament's Subcommittee on Human Rights last month. In her statement, Satkunanathan had allegedly called on the European Union to use its GSP Plus facility as leverage to pressure the Sri Lankan government on its human rights record. The Foreign Ministry says that the testimony had completely ignored progress on many fronts and cast doubt over the government's intentions and sincerity at a time when it is engaged in long-standing cooperation with UN human rights mechanisms. The ministry also expressed disappointment with Satgurunathan's recommendations to the EU on its GSP Plus facility and reminds that the removal of the facility could exacerbate poverty and income inequality, especially among the northern and eastern province fisheries and agriculture communities. The statement also labelled allegations of ethnic discrimination as unfounded and reminiscent of LTTE propaganda that once stoked communal hatred. Further, with regard to claims regarding the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the ministry says that the testimony hasn't taken into consideration the Sri Lankan government's efforts to amend the act, which are now in their final stages.
We will see you shortly. Bear with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Peiris is set to engage in a 2-day official visit in India. The Foreign Minister will set off for India on Sunday, the 6th of February. The visit comes at the heels of Sri Lanka signing an agreement for a $500 million line of credit with the Export-Import Bank of India for the purchase of petroleum products. Now, the Ministry of Health warned today that unless members of the public show more enthusiasm for being fully vaccinated with the 2-dose regime and the booster dose, current movement freedoms could be at risk. But more on that story a bit later. But before that, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Peiris insists that education content and livelihoods must be bridged to prevent the youth from being disenchanted with the education system. Now, his comments came at the centenary commemoration of Indian Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore's visit to the island.
Celebrating the centenary of Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore to Sri Lanka, the University of Colombo, in collaboration with the High Commission of India, unveiled a bust of Tagore at the Sri Pali campus in Horana yesterday. With Tagore having given the campus its name, Sri Pali, Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Gopal Bagle noted that Tagore sent a message to the world carrying the vision of the Orients at a time when the world only knew of Western triumphs.
One particular thing which distinguished Gurudev Tagore from other leaders and founding fathers of modern India, even in those times, are his travels. There is a difference between his visits to the West and his visits to the East. When he visited West, he visited for discovery, to tell them what he had in his heart. But when he went East, Gurudev was more on a pilgrimage. I read somewhere and I would like to quote what he said during one of his visits to Sri Lanka. He said, "The spirit of India once visited Lanka. As a poet, it is my mission to restore that ancient association of minds through my efforts that speak through the direct language of art." Those were the times when the world knew only one triumphant civilization, and that was the West. That was the materialistic civilization. And there rose the voice of this poet who said, no, our countries, India and Sri Lanka, this part of the world, the Orient, has had another vision, has had another idea of the whole world, of the whole humanity, which is not ours. Like the light of the Buddha, it is not India's, it is not Sri Lanka's, it is India's and Sri Lanka's, but it is of the rest of the world also, of the rest of the humanity also. So let us take this light, let us light another lamp and illuminate the whole world.
Of course, we must make changes in the curriculum. We must infuse into it subjects and disciplines that would help to bridge the gap between the content of education on the one hand and livelihoods on the other. If we don't do that, the educational system will fail to accomplish its purpose, and the inevitable result will be indignation on the part of young people. And we have seen the horrendous consequences of that in our country, which has led through 2 youth insurrections. So those are the results of a bizarre mismatch between education and employment. You educate young people, you enhance the threshold of expectation. And if the social order is seen to be unable to deliver even at the basic level, then the unavoidable consequence is deep disillusionment, disenchantment with the educational system. This is why it is necessary to keep changing in order to comply with what is required at any particular time. But in doing so, we must not forsake the ideals of Tagore and the purposes for which this great institution was established.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Health has issued a warning that unless people show more enthusiasm for being fully vaccinated, including the booster, the current movement freedoms could be at risk. The comments were made today by the Director of the Tertiary Care Services at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Anwar Hamdani, who noted 45 to 49% rise in bed occupancy cases this week compared to the week before.
Slowly but surely, Sri Lanka's COVID situation is moving towards a level of serious concern. Over the last 5 days, the daily COVID caseload has been above 1,000 and on the rise. The Ministry of Health says that there has been a 45 to 49% increase in bed occupancy compared to the previous week, when it was between 32 to 34%.
Comparatively, over the past week, we've noticed about 30 to 35% increase of cases, about close to about 10% increase about deaths, about 4 to 5% increase of ICU and oxygen dependency. So it is our duty to get ourselves vaccinated in order to protect ourselves as well as the country. Because all what we are experiencing now, all this freedom, all this leverage, all this crossing borders, moving around, being free all around is what we have gained through the second vaccination of our country. So that will not last long because everything has a limit over it.
So far, only 5,586,665 people have received the booster in Sri Lanka. That figure should have been far greater than that, given the fact that the booster rollout began on the 1st of November last year. Meanwhile, 16,762,399 have so far received at least one vaccine dose, while 13,982,511 have been fully vaccinated with the two-dose regime. Health experts believe that it is the success of the vaccination program that has allowed many COVID-infected patients to stay at home and receive treatment, as the jab largely prevents them from suffering severe complications from the virus. With many COVID patients undergoing treatment at home, health experts today emphasize the type of medication that people could take while at home.
තමන්ට හිසරදය ඒ වගේම උණ ගතිය ඇඟපත රිදීම තියෙනවා නම් පැරසිටමෝල් ඖෂධය වැඩිහිටි කෙනෙකුට නම් පැති දෙකක් දවසකට උපරිම වශයෙන් 3 සැරයක් හෝ 4 සැරයක් භාවිතා කළ හැකි. ඊට අමතරව පොටු දියර ගැලීමක් ඒ වගේම උගුරේ කැසීමක් ඒ වගේ රෝග ලක්ෂණ තිබෙනවා නම් අපි ඇන්ටිහිස්ටමින් කාණ්ඩයේ ඖෂධ ලොරටිඩින් ඒ වගේම ෆෙක්සොෆෙනඩින් ඒ වැනි ඖෂධයක් වෛද්‍යවරයෙකුගේ අනුමැතිය අනුව ලබාගත හැකියි.
However, Professor in Pharmacology at the Colombo University, Priyadarshini Galapathy, emphasized that people should not resort to taking any form of antibacterial medication or medication publicized on social media.
මේ අවස්ථාවේදී කිසිම ප්‍රතිජීවක ඖෂධ අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද මේක වෛරස් රෝගයක්. වෛරසයට ප්‍රතිජීවක ඖෂධ මගින් කිසිම උපකාරයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ මගින් සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ තමන්ගේ ඇඟට හිතකර බැක්ටීරියාවන් විනාශ වෙලා ඒ අනුව තමන්ට අහිතකර බැක්ටීරියාවන් මගින් ආසාදන තත්ත්වයක් ඇති කරන්නත් පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම ප්‍රතිජීවක ඖෂධ මගින් ඇතිවන අතුරු ආබාධ එන්නත් පුළුවන්. අනික් විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි අනුමත නොකරන ඖෂධ කාණ්ඩයක් තමයි ස්ටීරොයිඩ් කාණ්ඩයේ ඖෂධ. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ඩෙක්සාමෙතසෝන් වැනි ඖෂධ අපි කොවිඩ් නියුමෝනියා තත්ත්වය ඉතා අධික ලෙස වර්ධනය වූ අවස්ථාවක පමණක් භාවිතා කරන ඖෂධයක් තමයි ස්ටීරොයිඩ් කාණ්ඩයේ ඖෂධ. මෙම ඖෂධ මුල් කාලයේදී ගත්තොත් එහෙම මේ රෝගය සඳහා ඇතිවන ඇඟේ ප්‍රතිශක්තිය අඩු වෙලා ඉතා බරපතල තත්ත්වයකට පත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය මගිනුත් කරපු පරීක්ෂණ වලින් සනාථ වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Now, the winner of the Miss International UK title arrived in the island yesterday for a one-month stay where she will work with the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority to promote Sri Lanka as a sustainable destination for UK travellers.
Miss International UK winner for 2020-2021, Evangeline Elchmana, arrived in Sri Lanka yesterday for a one-month stay in the island. With both her parents being Sri Lankan, Evangeline will work together with the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority to promote the country in the UK. Tourism authorities hope to use this as an opportunity to showcase the country as a safe and secure destination for post-pandemic UK travellers. She will be representing the UK in the 60th Miss International Beauty Pageant in October this year. Among some of the main initiatives she expects to engage in during her stay here in Sri Lanka are building homes for the poor, funding various school projects, creating awareness against domestic violence and women empowerment.
With my title, I have raised over £70,000 and I have donated that to Sri Lanka to help build new homes for single mothers with children, and I'm looking forward to see those projects in real life. And during my stay here, one of the main factors why I visited Sri Lanka is to educate people on sustainability with my new charity organisation called Climate Exchange. I hope that I can introduce this to the younger generation to tell them how important it is to learn about how they can be sustainable in their lives.
Oil prices reached 7-year highs today as geopolitical tension and a winter storm in the United States fueled concerns over supply disruptions. Brent crude rose $1.32 to $92.43 a barrel, having earlier touched its highest since October 2014 at $92.66. US West Texas Intermediate crude rose $1.45 to $91.72 a barrel, after also scaling a 7-year peak at $91.91. Both benchmarks were on course for a 7th consecutive weekly gain. An analyst said that the latest upswing was triggered by cold snap in Texas, which is fueling concerns about production outages in the Permian Basin, the largest U.S. shale play. Oil markets have also gained support from tensions surrounding the Ukraine crisis, which have heightened concerns over oil supplies that are already tight. The OPEC Plus agreed this week to stick to moderate output increases of 400,000 barrels per day, with the group already struggling to meet existing targets and despite pressure from top consumers to raise production more quickly. Commerzbank has raised its oil price forecast for the third quarter for 2022 to $90 a barrel, up from the previous $80. Meanwhile, Wall Street snapped a 4-session winning streak today, with all 3 benchmarks ending lower after Facebook owner Meta Platforms' dour forecast sent its stock plummeting. Meta shares sank 26.4%, wiping around more than $200 billion off its market value. The decline in market capitalization was the largest ever recorded by a U.S. company in a single session, eclipsing when Apple Incorporated shed $180 billion on the 3rd of September last year. In turn, Meta's performance eliminated 0.9% of the Nasdaq's value and cut the S&P 500's combined worth by 0.6%. The exchanges respectively suffered their worst daily falls since September 2020 and February 2021. Big tech stocks such as Alphabet Incorporated and Microsoft Corporation fell more than 3%, while Amazon.com Incorporated slumped 7.8% before it was scheduled to release results. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 518.17 points to close at 35,111.16, while the S&P 500 lost 111.94 points to end at 4,477.44. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.